We all know the drill, right? Shoes off, laptops out, liquids in those tiny bottles. Airport security. It's a hassle, but I guess it's all for a reason, huh?
Right.
But what about when that system, all those checkpoints, what happens when they fail?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today.
We're diving deep into a real incident, a close call. It happened at Avalon Airport. It's in Victoria, Australia. And get this, a teenager tried to hijack a Jetstar flight.
Yeah, a scary situation.
We've been going through all the news reports about this, and it's a pretty tense story. We're going to unpack exactly what happened, look at the human side of it, and think about what it means for airport security in the future.
Right, because it raises some big questions. Like, for starters, think about Avalon Airport. It's an international airport, sure, but it's much smaller than, say, Melbourne's main hub.
Okay, so maybe that means different security challenges.
Possibly.
Sure.
And then there's Jetstar, the airline involved. They're a low-cost carrier.
Right, so maybe they operate on tighter margins. Could that have an impact on their security budget?
It's something to consider, for sure, as we go through the details.
So picture this. It's a Thursday, a normal day. A Jetstar flight is about to take off. It's headed for Sydney. Passengers are getting settled in, thinking about, their vacations or work trips. But nearby, there's this 17-year-old, and he's looking around dressed as a maintenance worker. He's managed to cut through the airport's fence.
And here's the really unsettling part. This isn't just some kid trying to sneak onto a flight. He's carrying a loaded shotgun. He gets all the way up to the plane.
Like something out of a movie.
And this is where things could have gone really, really bad.
Oh, yeah.
The flight attendant, she sees the gun and confronts him. Can you imagine the panic? There were like 150 passengers on board that flight.
That's hard to even imagine.
But this is where we see some incredible bravery. 3 passengers, they see what's happening and they jump into action.
It's amazing. One of them, his name is Barry Clark. He tackles the teenager. He actually shields the flight attendant and wrestles the shotgun away. This is a guy, he didn't hesitate. He put himself right in the line of fire.
Absolutely. And we have some quotes from him about that moment. He said, "Before we knew it, a shotgun appeared. I was worried about it being shot, so all I could do is push her out of the way, get the gun out of the way, break that gun and throw it down the stairs, and then put him in a hold, throw him to the ground until the police came."
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
He prevented what could have been a real tragedy.
No doubt. And he wasn't alone. 2 other passengers helped hold the teenager down until the police got there. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What would you do?
Oh, I don't even know. It's hard to say.
It really is. So while all this is happening, while Clark is disarming the teenager, the police, they found other items on him. And these items, they raise some even bigger concerns.
Right. And that's where the police investigation gets even more interesting, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to understand his motive.
Yeah.
And they haven't ruled out terrorism, although it's still early in the investigation.
Yeah. They even brought in the bomb squad because they found bags in the teenager's car. Thankfully, the car was declared safe, but still.
But the fact that he got through security with a loaded shotgun and ammunition, that's a huge security breach.
Huge. And Superintendent Michael Reed, he was leading the police investigation. He didn't mince words. He said, "It is very concerning that a person can firstly breach security, approach an aircraft, and make his way potentially close to being inside an aircraft with a firearm. I can't communicate more clearly how concerning that is."
Yeah, I get it. It really shows how even our, most secure systems can have vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And remember, Avalon's a smaller airport. Maybe their security measures are different compared to a bigger, busier airport.
That's true. So this might not just be about one airport messing up. It might point to bigger problems with airport security in general.
That's what we're going to be looking at. But first, let's talk about what Jetstar has said about all of this.
Right, the airline itself.
They released a statement saying they were cooperating with the investigation and that passenger and crew safety was their top priority.
Well, at least no one was hurt.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember, the impact goes way beyond just that one flight. Avalon Airport was totally shut down after this happened. Flights were canceled, others were rerouted.
Oh, wow. So the impact was big.
It was. And it brings up a lot of questions about what needs to change to make sure this never happens again. What can airports do? What can airlines do?
Big questions, and we'll be exploring them in more depth when we come back. We've been talking about this attempted hijacking at Avalon Airport, and it really makes you think about the future of airport security. What needs to change?
It's a big question, and it goes beyond just, physical barriers and checkpoints. You have to look at the human element, too.
Right, because in this case, it was the passengers who really saved the day. They were amazing. But it also makes you wonder, like, should we be relying on ordinary people to stop something like this?
That's a tough one. Ideally, the security protocols, they should prevent these situations from happening in the first place. But we also have to be realistic. No system is perfect.
Right. And sometimes, in those crucial moments, it's people being alert and ready to act that can really make the difference.
It's a balance for sure. We all want to feel safe when we travel, but we don't want airports to feel like, some kind of prison. And we definitely don't want to put all the responsibility for security onto passengers.
But I do wonder if this incident, if it might change the conversation about passenger involvement in security. Maybe we need to start thinking more about situational awareness, like empowering people to recognize and report suspicious activity.
That's interesting. It could be a way to create a more layered approach where everyone has a part to play.
So instead of just going through the motions at security, maybe we all need to be a little more engaged, more aware of what's happening around us.
Right, exactly. It's about vigilance, but without, creating a climate of fear.
So how do we do that? How do we find that balance? What can airports actually do to improve security without, turning them into lockdown zones?
Well, first things first. There needs to be a thorough investigation. They need to figure out exactly how this teenager managed to get through security at Avalon in the first place. What went wrong? Were there lapses in protocol? Were there staffing issues? Things like that.
And we talked earlier about Jetstar being a low-cost carrier. I wonder, could that have played a role in their security procedures?
It's possible. Budget constraints can definitely impact things, like how many security personnel they have, the kind of training they receive, even if they have the latest technology.
And it's also interesting that Avalon is, it's a smaller airport. Do they even have the same level of security as, say, a big international hub?
That's a good question, because every airport is different, They all have different layouts, different traffic patterns, different challenges. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
So maybe instead of having these standardized security procedures, the same everywhere, we need to start tailoring them to the specific airport, the specific risks.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. We need a flexible system, one that can adapt as the threats change, as new vulnerabilities emerge.
And it's not just about physical security either, right? There's also the psychological aspect. How do you screen for intent? How do you identify someone who might be a threat?
That's a really difficult question. And it's something that security professionals are grappling with all the time. I mean, in this case, this teenager, he blended right in. He looked harmless. It makes you think about how effective things like profiling or behavioral analysis really are.
So, what can we do about that? Do we need to give security personnel better training? Do we need to invest in new technologies that can detect potential threats more effectively?
It's probably a combination of both, honestly. You need highly trained personnel, people who can pick up on those subtle cues, who can engage with passengers in a way that, gets them talking, who can spot those little things that seem off.
Right. And then you also need the technology that can back them up. Things like advanced screening systems, facial recognition, maybe even artificial intelligence that can analyze all the data and flag potential risks.
But even with all the tech in the world, it still comes down to people, doesn't it? We need people who are paying attention, who are aware of their surroundings, and who are willing to speak up if they see something that's not right.
So it's about a shared responsibility for security, recognizing that we all play a part in keeping each other safe. We've talked a lot about security systems and, all the technology involved. But what really stays with me from this Avalon Airport thing is the people.
Yeah, I agree. It's the quick thinking and the bravery of those passengers that really stands out. Especially Barry Clark. He just jumped into action. They went from everyday people to heroes in a matter of seconds.
It's incredible. I just keep thinking, what must have been going through their minds at that moment? The fear, the adrenaline.
Yeah.
It must have been so intense to make that split-second decision to act.
Exactly. And that's what's so unpredictable about these kinds of situations. You just never know how you'll react until you're in them. And that's why it's so crucial to have people who are willing to step up, even when they're facing danger.
For sure. It's easy to get caught up in all the, the procedures at the airport, the scanners, the pat-downs, all those rules.
Yeah.
But this incident, it reminds us that at the end of the day, it's people who make the real difference.
It's about being alert, having the courage to act, and that sense of responsibility, looking out for the safety of other people.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this question. What happens now? How will this event change how we think about air travel in the future.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something that airports, airlines, security agencies all over the world are going to have to think about. Do they invest more in technology, or do they try to empower passengers to be more involved in security?
It's a tough balance, right? I mean, we don't want to live in a world where we're all suspicious of each other all the time, where going to the airport feels like entering a prison.
Right, but we also can't ignore the fact that there are real threats out there, and sometimes even with the best security in place, things can slip through the cracks.
This Avalon airport incident, it's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
It makes us realize that we're not invincible. You know, it forces us to look at the weaknesses, to rethink our assumptions, and to figure out how we can create a safer travel environment for everybody.
And I think it also shows how important human connection really is. I mean, the passengers who stepped in, they weren't just following some rule book. They were acting on instinct, on a very human need to protect themselves and the people around them.
It's a good reminder that even in the middle of all the chaos and fear, there's still hope. There's still that human capacity for courage and compassion for taking care of each other.
It's a powerful message for sure. Security isn't just about machines and systems, it's about us, and sometimes it's that human element that makes the biggest difference.
This deep dive has given us a lot to consider. I think it's raised more questions than it's answered, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's got us thinking, and hopefully it's encouraged you, our listener, to keep exploring, keep researching, and to draw your own conclusions.
That's exactly what the deep dive is all about. We don't have all the answers, but we're here to help you make sense of the world around us. Thanks for joining us.